portraits, comics, character design, or caricatures, every single face I've ever drawn started with the Loomis Head. I've put together a guided worksheet that you can print out or use on your computer to help you systematically learn the Loomis Head. With it, you can build faces efficiently and create unique characters from different angles with ease. The Loomis Head is a simple model that puts together the three basic requirements to draw a head. We need a ball for the skull, a plane for the face, and we need a side plane for the side of our face. Ta-da! That's it! You now have a fully functioning Loomis Head. But as artists, we can always pretty it up a little. For example, noticing that the face plane is a continuation of the ball of the skull, whereas the side planes of our head cuts into the ball of the skull like the side of a wheel. And we can also choose to taper our chin a little bit or not. Finally, we make the famous third partition of the hairline, brow line, and nose lines, and a delineation line between the front and side planes of the face. Of course, on real people, the transition from the front to side plane is rounded and gradual. That depends on the character you're drawing and your design style. We'll start with a little warm-up by tracing over the Loomis heads of different angles. I've included the JPEG and Photoshop versions of the worksheets in the description. Otherwise, you can take a screenshot here. I've colored the more common head angles in orange, those in the center. The other are pretty extreme, but could be fun to attempt as well. I like to start with the 45-degree one as it shows all the parts of the Loomis head. Start with a simple circle. You don't have to be perfect, but make corrections to get it somewhat close. Next, establish the rest of the silhouette. Make your lines as long and simple as you can make them. Next, we'll move on to the interior features. We can either establish the thirds on the face plane or the side plane circle. I'd like to point out that traditionally, there's a little math involved in constructing the smaller side plane circle. You get it by cutting a third from the top and bottom half of the bigger circle. And you can use that directly to determine the thirds on the front plane. This is not so useful for other angles, and I find myself eyeballing it most of the time. But I do recommend trying it out for the head angles where there are no tilts. This can be done for the front angle as well. After you've drawn the big circle, thirds from each half of the circle can be used to determine how much of the head to lop off. Again, here I tend to eyeball it since a little rounding is necessary after you cut off the side pieces anyway. Go ahead and loosely construct a few other angles. I went and did all of them because I haven't drawn in a while and they're a great way to warm up again. After you do a few rough sketches, we'll move on to only having the silhouettes. You can choose to have the cheat sheet open on the side, or you can turn it on and off to check your progress. Since this is purely a Loomis head workout, we won't be spending time detailing the eyes, nose, and mouth, but you're welcome to add your own personal touches to make it more fun. I've created a little ramp cheat sheet so that you can add noses to your Loomis heads if you want. Again, start with a simple circle, clean it up somewhat, and complete the silhouette. From the silhouette, we can kind of guess at where the side plane is, divide up the face plane into thirds, but you can also think of it like a cylinder where you can continue the side plane onto the front and construct the third that way. You can turn on the grid layer if you're lost or need to check your progress. You don't need to be exact, and if you're comfortable with your construction and you feel it's consistent within itself, then don't worry about it being a little bit off. I did a quick check here. I'm a little bit off making the head tilting down too much. I added in some generic brow and eyes. Notice that the brow line only has to be roughly where your brow is on average. And you can use a simple triangle or a circle for the nose if you want. The opening of the mouth is canonically on the top third of the jaw portion. Next, we'll move on to the profile pose. Start with a circle and establish the silhouette. Draw the side plane circle either by the third construction or just eyeballing it. There's no strict requirement here, as I mentioned in the intro, but make sure that your thirds on the front plane lines up somewhat with the side plane circle and just not too far off. Try to complete as many of the heads in the middle zone and turn on the grid layer for checkups and make sure you're not too far off. For the tilted heads, note that the thirds will be off as perspective will make the further thirds smaller and smaller. And additionally, for the ones tilted upwards, the hairline will be eclipsed by the forehead with a sufficient tilt. You don't necessarily have to worry about mathematically how much smaller they get, but just to make sure that they do get progressively smaller. In this part, we'll take a departure from our worksheet and practice some freestyling without it. But first, let's look at how that applies to a real portrait and see how it differs and modifies the ideal Loomis head. Start with a big circle for the head and close up the silhouette on the jawlines. Observe the roundedness of the forehead and see where it kind of flattens out on the side. And you'll have to make your call on where the flattened side plane starts. Now make your mark for the thirds and take a look at how much it differs from our ideal and generic heads. Have references of a person's head in different angles and see if you can extrapolate different angles of the Loomis head free-handed. The Loomis head is a great way to study stylization as well. It lets you analyze the particular style you want to go for and see how much you want to emphasize the cartoonishness. For example, looking at Elsa, the thirds are stretched in a particular way with the nose third being larger, and you can easily adapt this to other angles and copy the head over. Now go freestyle, generate your own Loomis heads and see if you can do a few empty Loomis heads. To beginner, the Loomis head might look overly restrictive and generic, but that is actually the exact point of the Loomis head. The key utility of the Loomis head is that, much like a save point or a teleportation point in a game, the Loomis head takes us to an average, safe, and familiar spot where we can explore the areas around, in our case, faces as opposed to dungeons, from a centralized, unbiased position. I'll recommend using these Loomis heads as warm-ups. Maybe draw over the orange section of the Loomis heads once or twice a day loosely, or you can use them as bases for creating your own character and finding different angles or expressions from them. We did not really go over the individual facial features, eyes, nose, and mouth. Do study those separately. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe.